Hi, I'm tired and I'm also Stephen Janaka. So please excuse any poor posturing if you notice me. I am going to be talking about depression and addiction today, though, which, you know, I'm sure almost everyone has experienced actually, which is kind of interesting. That's why I think it's relatively important to hear about new research that's coming up on depression and anxiety because I think it's a big part of everybody's life now. You know, a lot of people are dealing with it, if not directly, indirectly. So that's why I thought it would be interesting to offer up some neat facts. So we're going to be talking about psilocybin mushrooms. If you don't know what psilocybin mushrooms are, they're a conglomerate of a group of mushrooms, also known as magic mushrooms. And of this conglomerate, each mushroom shares in common two substances, and these two substances are the psychoactive compounds that make magic mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms. And those two compounds are psilocybin and psilocin. Psilocin is 1.4 times stronger than psilocybin. That fact was courtesy of Center for Drug Abuse Research. Like I said, psilocin is 1.4 times stronger than psilocybin. However, you have to ingest the mushroom, and as a result of that, psilocin gets converted into psilocybin. And just to say this really quickly, it goes to your brain and messes with a particular receptor within your brain that causes visual hallucinations, mainly visual hallucinations. I mean, there are feelings of extreme euphoria and also feelings of extreme anxiety and time warping effects. But for the most part, it is, as a hallucinogen, it is a mainly visual hallucinogen. But back on track, we're going to talk about addiction now. We're going to talk about a study done with 15 smokers in three separate doses of psilocybin, spread out over a span of time. And as a result of these 3-dose treatment plan, each of these smokers experienced, some interesting effects. And they checked in with all the smokers after, 6 months, 12 months, and 2.5 years. At the 6-month mark, 12 of the 15 smokers were not smoking for 6 months, Then at the 12-month mark, 10 were still not smoking. So, 2 of them went back to smoking. And then at the 2.5-year mark, 9 of the initial 15 were still not smoking. So, I mean, imagine taking 3, pills or something, and after 2.5 years, the problem that you had was still gone as a result of 3 pills you took, which is essentially, what they did in the study. They gave them 3 amounts of a substance, and as a result, they experienced a benefit that lasted 2.5 years. So that's pretty crazy. But that's just some intro research they're doing. Psilocybin is still an illegal compound, so you have to communicate with the government if you want to do studies on it. So there's only a few studies, really. But yeah, that was just an interesting one on addiction for smokers. They haven't done it with coke or heroin, so I don't know what the result would be for those. Probably, I don't know. It's interesting. It's still cutting edge. Now we're going to move on to a study done by Johnson and Griffiths. Well, not a study, I guess. Johnson and Griffiths wrote a paper, and the paper outlined several studies. They did it really vaguely. I didn't really like it, but I did find, an interesting study. And essentially what happened in that study is there were 2 doses. One was 10 milligrams, one was 25 milligrams, and they gave all their participants were depressed. So they gave these depressed participants who were experiencing some form of a depressive disorder that was actually diagnosed, not people who are coming in saying, I'm depressed. I just want some mushrooms. No, it was actually depressed people who were coming in for the study. And they took 2 doses separately. Like I said, 10 milligrams, 25 milligrams. And there was a majority reduction of depressive symptoms at the 1-week mark, sustained until 3 months. And so at that 3-month mark, there was a drop-off, I guess you could say. You know how a bipolar person would experience states of extreme euphoria and then states of extreme depression. I'm kind of likening it to that, but I mean, it wasn't like that, so I don't know why I said that. I'm sorry. essentially, at the 3-month mark, there was a drop-off where people started experiencing their regular depressive symptoms again, which I think is interesting because, there isn't another substance you could find where you would take 2 doses of it and experience a benefit for up to 3 months. I mean, I know there are some antidepressants you can take that you don't take every day, but I don't know if there's one you could even take that would last a whole week because, like it says, there was a majority reduction in 1 week. So could you imagine taking something once or twice and then the whole week your depressive symptoms are gone? That's pretty crazy. But again, it was really vague. I mean, they didn't even tell you how many participants there were. But there was one study I found by Rosalind Watts. This is actually a TED Talk. And she did with 20 participants with not just clinical depression. Clinical depression in and of itself is very difficult to deal with. It takes a lot of intense cognitive therapy and, very pedantic drug treatment, with antidepressants. But regardless, it wasn't just clinical depression, it was treatment-resistant clinical depression. So people weren't getting a benefit from cognitive therapy, and they were not getting a benefit from antidepressants. So these treatment-resistant clinically depressed participants came into Rosalind Watts' study, and they each took a single high dose of psilocybin. And as a result of this, after 6 months, so this was, they checked in with them after 6 months, 6 remained in remission from treatment-resistant clinical depression. 11 of them said they started experiencing, their symptoms again after 2 months. And 3 of them said that it didn't help at all. They were still clinically depressed, and they wasted their time, which kind of sucks, But regardless, imagine taking, the reason I find this interesting and the reason I want to share this with you is because these people took a substance, regardless of what it is, that didn't, in all these studies I like to mention, in every single one of them, at the end they said there were no adverse effects of the participants. So that, obviously that's an important thing to make sure, because it would be one thing if they didn't have depression, it would be another thing if they also, experienced a psychotic breakdown as a result of the psilocybin, but none of the people experienced any adverse effects, and it seems to me that they experienced a lot of benefits from this. I mean, again, imagine taking a pill or one amount of a substance and experiencing benefits for up to 2 months. I mean, these 6 of them remained in remission for 6 months. Imagine being clinically depressed, which is, it's hard for anyone to really put into perspective what clinical depression is. Even if you have a minor depressive disorder, it's nothing compared to clinical depression. Jordan Peterson likened it to waking up and imagining that he was a clinically depressed clinical psychologist. He likened it to waking up every morning and thinking that everyone in your family was dead as a result of you. So, imagine having a form of depression like that go away from a single substance. I think that's really, really interesting. And that's why I wanted to share it with you, because I think despite the fact that this is a legal substance, despite the fact that we don't know a lot about it, just like we don't know a lot about our oceans, there's still a lot of potential to this substance. And I think in the future, we might, get some benefit from it. And you might be wondering, well, how do these people experience a benefit from psilocybin? And the theory is that, because of the warped sense of time and because of the visual hallucinations, people are experiencing aspects of their subconscious rise up, and in that therapeutic setting, they are addressing subconscious issues that they wouldn't normally be able to address with baseline cognitive therapy and antidepressants. And so that's one of the theories. And because it's a warped sense of time as well, you're experiencing. I've never done psilocybin, so I can't really say, but you're experiencing a longer amount of time and a shorter amount of time, and because of that, you have longer to cope with your problems. But a lot of potential. If you guys want to look into it, the TED Talk that I talked about was by Rosalind Watts.